Great. Hey, everyone. We're just waiting for Steve to call in. I don't think I see anybody here who submitted questions, but thanks to those who did. And we'll just get started as soon as we get him on the phone. He's going to call in, so we won't see him. But yeah, hope everyone's staying safe and healthy so far. So we're just waiting a few more minutes.
I submitted a question. Ryan, did you send it forward?
Yep. I got all the questions in a document. So I actually see a few names that I recognize in here. So we'll get to as many as we can.
In the meantime, can you tell us what your connection is with the person that is calling in?
Yeah, I will field that question. It is actually my stepfather. So we all lucked out here in that sense.
And Ryan, just tell us what his position is in what bank?
Yeah, it's kind of a long title. So he is the director of commercial services, and he oversees the business lending and deposit services for Mid-Oregon Credit Union. So he's been dealing with all of this every single day, all of the time. And if there is an expert in the field, he is it right now. So.
And I just took everyone's questions and boiled them down to kind of a handful of categories, and I think we'll be able to get most folks' questions in. I'm not going to. There's a lot of some people asked some basic information that is readily available online, and I don't want to, I'm not going to do an overview, I guess, of the program. But we can really quickly right now just say that we're mostly going to be talking about the payroll protection program, which you apply for through a bank specifically, not through the SBA. And I'm hoping we can drill down into some of the unanswered questions out there as the Treasury guidance is sort of changing, it seems, and varies based on lender. So we can, we'll field some of these questions. Thanks for the ones that are coming in the chat. I think most of the things that are coming in are generally covered.
All right, here. All right, so we have Steven here. I'm going to try making him a host.
Great. Steve, can you hear us, and can we hear you? Figuring out the technology.
Yeah. There he is. I see him. Hi, Steve. I see you there.
He's muted.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. There we go.
There you are.
Yeah, I didn't know I had to do that. I'm just the old guy on the phone. Give me a break.
Well, we're happy that this old guy is here. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
You bet. You bet. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yeah, Steve, thanks so much for being here. I think we have most of the folks on here now. And would you just maybe briefly tell us how your last few days have been regarding the payroll protection program loans? It sounds like you've been busy.
Yeah, it's really the last, since a week ago, Monday, this whole program that was rolled out through the SBA as a result of the CARE Act being signed into legislation on the 27th. And over that ensuing weekend, information came out about the program that caught all of us lenders just flat-footed when we hit our desk on that following Monday morning. So it's been crazy. It's been drinking from a fire hose all day long. trying to catch up with how this program works or how it's intended to work. The devil's in the details. It's certainly something that we're living day to day here. So at this juncture, I think that my little institution, which is Mid-Oregon Credit Union in Central Oregon, and I'm in charge of business loans for Mid-Oregon. So myself and my team, which is about, well, last week it was 6 of us, now it's 9 of us. We've thrown some more manpower at it. We're just trying to get these things to start getting through the system. And just to give you an idea, we've had about 200, 225 inquiries that we're now turning into applications and pushing them through the system. And this juncture, we've actually got 3 approvals by the SBA. So you can see we have a long ways to go to process them all.
And when you say approvals, does that mean that you've already dispersed the funds?
No. And the reason that we haven't dispersed the funds is until today, the SBA hasn't told any of the lenders how they need to document these things. You know, what the promissory notes and other agreements are that we need to use. So we just have approval, which means the SBA says that one's approved per the program, and you can go ahead and document it once we tell you how to document it. So that's what we're waiting for.
Got it. And folks on the call submitted a bunch of questions that I'd love to ask of you, because it's been, you know, a challenge to get information, as you know. Don't let me interrupt you, though. If you had more to share, please go for it.
No, I think everyone's got a kind of the sense of the kind of the landscape and what this thing is like. So go ahead with your questions. I want to bore you with any more of the details.
Great. So I think a lot of people's there was clusters of questions, since a lot of people here either don't have employees or have employees that they pay through payroll and don't pay themselves through payroll, but pay themselves through owner draws. So one question is, are you all approving you know, owners draws as part of people's payroll? And follow-up question to that is, how are people documenting it? Does it need to be 2019 taxes? Are there other forms that you're using?
Yeah, so taking kind of that last question first, if you haven't filed your 2019 taxes, which is most of us, you know, particularly if you're a small business, what the lenders are instructed to do is look at your 2018 taxes and then look at your in-house profit and loss statement, otherwise known as an income statement, for 2019. Compare those to see that they're comparable and that you know, there wasn't any drastic increase in payroll that was not accounted for. You also have to provide your actual payroll records if you have employees, so we can look at those relative to your income statements. And you also have to provide your 941s, which is basically your quarterly IRS forms you have to do to complete for all your employees. So we look at all of that, and then in regards to those that are closely held businesses where you're taking draws, et cetera, it's a little bit of a gray area still, and we haven't processed one of those yet. But what we understand is we will look at the draws. Sometimes they're guaranteed draws in an LLC or in a sub-S corporation. They may just be the bottom line. So if you, for instance, are let's say a sub-S corporation, if any of you are familiar with that, and you don't pay yourself anything as a salary, which you have that choice as a small business, but your bottom line is you made, let's say, $50,000 for the year, then that is supposedly your salary for the year as the owner. If you have multiple owners, of course, you divide that between the multiple owners. So that's how it is looked at. And it's a little bit of a gray area. I just sent a request to the SBA this morning asking for more clarification on that. They have not replied to me as of yet. And by the way, after all this, if there's some questions that are still lingering, I'd be happy to follow up with an email to Ryan or to you, Trip, and we can take it, you know, you can distribute it as you'd like.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Okay, so what I'm hearing is you don't have to rush to do your 2019 taxes right away. And I would like to just maybe drill down into that a little bit more, because I have gotten in touch with Lendio and Fundera, because my credit union sadly does not do SBA loans. I think there's other folks on the call who are in the same boat. Lendio said, got to have 2019 or nothing, or we can't use your draws. Do you think, I mean, from your point of view, do you think like that's a moment to shop around, try and find another lender, or is that a moment to wait until things are more clear from the SBA or the Treasury Department?
Well, the Lendio, and I'm familiar with Lendio. We're actually using them to kind of warehouse our applications, but then we do the processing. So Lendio is taking that out, and they're going to a particular lender. So Lendio is not a lender themselves, so they're going to go to a lender, and that lender may have its own requirements. But I wouldn't stand still for 5 minutes. I would go and find another lender that you can work with. My recommendation to everybody is to work with the bank or credit union that you currently have and see if they can process your application. As you said, not everyone's doing them, which is too bad, but that's just the way it is. And most of us, including my institution, we're only taking applications from those that currently are with us as members or they bank with us.
Right. And as far as other things that can be included in that, we talk about payroll, retirement benefits, such as retirement and healthcare. For sole proprietors, single member LLCs, can we count our own healthcare as part of that?
Only if you expensed it through your income statement. So if it's something that's paid after your own income was distributed to you, then the answer is no.
Copy that. Okay. And people who do not have employees are waiting until Friday to apply. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And would you recommend
basically sole proprietors? Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
And would you recommend people reach out right now to a lender or just wait? Like what can people be doing between now and Friday, I guess?
Fill out the application. Are there people on the call that haven't had access to the application yet? Because that's another link that I can send out.
I'll send that link out just to make sure everybody has it.
Okay. So I would recommend filling out the application and pull together the other items that are going to be required. And this is one that I should send out to you because we didn't discover some of this until we actually went through the application process. Some of it's pretty basic, like number of employees. That's easy for a lot of people. The year your business was established, your zip code, are you a citizen? Of course, your social security number. For whatever reason, they want to know if you're married or not. And then your driver's license information, they would like to have that too. So I would say, and most of that's going to be captured in the application process that you're going to fill out, but I can send a follow-up to you, Ryan, if you want to distribute that to everybody.
Yeah, that would be great. Can I ask a really quick question about this?
Yep.
So with the number of employees, if it is just you as a sole proprietor, do you count yourself as an employee or do you just say you have 0?
For the purposes of this application, I would count yourself.
Okay, so you would say 1.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm not 100% on that, but one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of this is a tracking information. They don't want you to be over 500 employees. So if you're just one, or 0 or 1, it doesn't really matter. This is a tracking thing for the SBA. So there's probably some discretion there in how it's counted, but I would say just count yourself as 1.
Okay.
And do you think there's going to be any? Okay. Yeah, I think there's some more questions about employees. I mean, one is somehow we have to show that we didn't fire people or lay people off.
Right.
Is that going to be based on, you think, what we put on our loan or what's on our payroll on February 15th?
One of the things that's required, and it's not apparent on the application, so good question, is that you need to provide your payroll records for 2019 and for 2020 year to date. And again, the lender will be rifling through that to make sure that everything looks like it's the trend continues, if you will, that you have employees, and also that you're not paying yourself too much. So you know that there's limitation, $100,000 on anybody, any employee, but typically the owner. You cannot declare anything more than $200,000, than $100,000, and that would include year to date. It would be prorated.
Got it. And it sounds like okay, so it sounds like we have a couple more requests for clarifications on insurance, but it sounds like if you didn't expense your insurance, if it's not already on your LLCs or your sole proprietor's books, then we're not including that.
That's correct. You would not include it.
Okay, I have a bit more general question, but I think it's relevant to this part of it. Do you think this is going to run out? Should we be, I mean, how stressed should we be about getting our applications in immediately?
Well, I wouldn't let too much moss gather. You know, I heard last evening, as some of the rest of you probably did too, that 70 billion of the 360 billion, whatever it is, has been approved by the SBA. So that's roughly 1/5, right? So the initial pile of money that they've allocated towards this, about 1/5 has been spoken for. So I wouldn't let too much time pass to get your application in. And getting your application in doesn't mean that you're good to go. Your lender has to get it through the process, and once they've got the guarantee, then you're good to go. Even if they don't disperse the funds for several days. And by the way, we heard this morning that the SBA wants the banks and credit unions to disperse the loan within 5 days of getting the approval from the SBA.
That sounds great. And when you mentioned the application earlier, there's the application form that's out there from the SBA, which I assume is what you're talking about linking to.
Right.
And then,
Form 2483.
right. And then there's a bunch of kind of online applications that folks like Lendio, Fundera, and even financial institutions or lenders are creating from their own process.
Right.
It sounds like just if you fill out your own SBA application, you know, you could then on Friday send that with all the documentation to whatever lender you're working with. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, but for instance, you mentioned Lendio, which is an online portal, basically for you to go to and fill out essentially the application online. So my recommendation is the actual application itself, use it as a worksheet. I'd say fill it out so you know what's going to be asked of you as you go through the Lendio or whatever online application you use. Now, some lenders are just going to want the actual hard copy application. Actually, we all have to collect those, but some lenders may not use an online portal. And so you're going to need it one way or another, either as a worksheet or the actual application that the lender will then use.
Great, that makes sense. Another question that someone submitted is, do you anticipate that these loans will be fully funded at the 2.5 times payroll? Is there some discretion in there of how much?
Once it's submitted by the lender, so the lender is certifying to the SBA what the qualified amount is. So it's up to us. The SBA doesn't look at any of the financial information. It's up to the lender to look at the financial information and qualify you for the amount that you're requesting. So well, we haven't processed that many yet, but for instance, I have one on my desk right now, and they mistakenly included an item for lease payments on equipment. That's not eligible. So basically, we had to back that out of their intended use of the proceeds and deduct that from the amount of the loan. And by the way, let me dwell on that for just a minute, because one thing that's is not apparent in the application request is that you need to put together your intended use of the funds. So the amount you can qualify for is pretty straightforward. It's your 2.5 times your average monthly payroll plus benefits, et cetera, for 2019. But then what do you use the money for over the 8 weeks after you get it? And the biggest item is payroll. You have to spend 75% of it on payroll, but you can also spend the balance on rent, facility rent, mortgage interest if you have a mortgage interest on your business, not your home, but your business, and utilities. So those are the only things you can spend it on.
I have a specific question about a few people actually about real estate. If you are, a sole proprietor or single member LLC that manages and owns the real estate, that's something that is that eligible as your sort of your payroll, what your profit from that for the PPP?
Probably not. I don't know the answer to that, Trip, but I would guess that that's probably not. It would be the payroll that you would have for that company if you had people that you employed. But your question is it's passive income, really, right? And that you have a bottom line income or loss. Can you apply for that income and loss as? That's a good question. I have not encountered that one yet. I'll follow up on it.
Got ya. Thank you. Okay, and just to clarify, quick question about, actually I've heard a few people confused about this. For, sole proprietors, single member LLCs with no employees, when we talk about rent that you can use it for, I think we're talking about what you've probably declared previously as, like if you have a home office or something like that. That might be what you've already deducted in past years. How does a home office play in?
Well, that's also, I'd say, a gray area, because you're not going to. Well, you'll have a line item on your tax return for that, right? That you write it off. But how are you going to spend that in the ensuing 8 weeks? You have to, and the way you spend the money is as important as what you qualify for. So how do you actually spend that? And you don't really write a check to yourself for home office use. So I think that's a gray area I'd be careful of.
Makes sense. We had a whole bunch of people ask questions. This is a little bit off your topic, so I'm asking you to speculate. Do you have any thoughts on the idea loans and if we'll actually see them?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you have any thoughts on the economic injury disaster loans from SBA, and if we'll actually see them?
I think that you'll see them eventually. We're recommending everybody apply for one that inquires of us. And I think you've all probably heard about the up to $10,000 grant that will be distributed as soon as you make application, not when you're approved, and that's a forgivable grant. I don't know anyone who's received a check yet, but I do know a lot of people that have been told that they're coming. So I don't see any harm in applying for that. Now, as it ties into the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, any amount that you are approved for that will be used for payroll will be rolled into the PPP loan. And so you're not going to be able to double dip, if you will, for funding payroll. But the $10,000 grant is not, it's a grant. So you don't calculate that in the PPP loan. That's yours to spend. Have you heard of anybody getting a check yet?
No, and we actually had a call on Saturday that some of the folks were on here. They applied since Washington was able to apply before the rest of the country. They applied and actually got to communicate with SBA folks. And I see Becca nodding, but no cash has been dispersed yet, it sounds like. Okay.
No,
yeah,
that's been dispersed.
Great. Okay, and I'm just checking through some of these questions here. Some of them I will. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are, I don't know, some questions about, if your taxes are filed, if you have like pass-through income, and if you file with your wife or husband, it doesn't seem like that's affects your spouse in any way, right? That's just your own sort of your own loan.
I didn't. Was there a question there?
No, not really. I'm sorry. I'm just mentioning some of the other things. I think we've gotten through most of the questions. Does anybody have a question that is not on here? Again, we can go through some of the basic stuff that's available online once we don't have Steve.
I just have a clarifying question for talking about the use of funds, having to sort of show how you're going to use the funds on rent, utilities, and payroll. If we're self-employed, don't have employees, and so we're using that sort of Schedule C bottom line as our payroll, how do we prove, how do we account for the money that we're just using to essentially pay ourselves?
I think that it's, first of all, you have to prove it to the bank. And the only reason you have to prove it is if you want forgiveness of the loan, because remember, these things are 100% forgivable as long as you can prove it. and your banker or credit union lender agrees with you. So what I would do is, since you're starting with the bottom line of your Schedule C from last year, so to speak, and you're calculating 1/12 of that as your monthly payroll expense, then I think that as long as you can demonstrate that that is on a pro rata basis, the same number, if you will, in the ensuing 8 weeks, that you'll be okay. Make sense?
Yeah, great.
And remember, 75% of that you receive has to be used for payroll, however that's defined. So I would think that if you're the only employee, then 75% of that could be used for your own compensation. I'm going to look into that one a little bit further too, though.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big question, especially coming this Friday.
Yep.
Anybody else?
I had a clarifying question on the item you raised regarding the real estate. So SBA is not very clear when I went through sort of the non-qualifying businesses where they sort of highlight out this passive, but then they talk about passive being you're not actively engaged in managing or running the real estate aspect of the business. And so is there a difference between if you're actively managing it yourself versus subcontracting it out to a property management? And so if you're actively managing it to yourself, would that then not be excluded from the SBA list of excluded businesses?
I think that's kind of in line with that question earlier about, is investment real estate eligible? I mean, like you said, if you're managing it yourself, it's your business. And I don't know the answer to that. That's one that I'll attempt to follow up on. And by the way, when I say attempt to follow up on, this is one of those things that the SBA doesn't have a lot of clarity either in some of these issues. But they say, well, we'll get back to you and check this website, which is kind of a lender's website. But I'll follow up on that one.
Thank you.
You bet.
I have a follow-up question on the forgiveness aspect of these loans. So I'm a sole proprietor LLC, and I'd be calculating my monthly income from the bottom line of Schedule C. But my income's highly variable, and it may or may not drastically exceed that line for the next 8 weeks. How do I show if my income's greater than some level? Will that not be forgiven? Or I don't fully understand how I'm supposed to show what my level of compensation should be and how I'm going to document that.
Okay, so starting with your qualification, how much you can borrow, you're going to look at what happened last year and take your average monthly income from last year, and that's going to be your base for calculating that 250% of that is the maximum you can apply for. And so I think in that example, let's just take an example. If you didn't have income last year, if you showed an operating loss in your Schedule C, then you don't have any income from last year, and you can't apply for it. On the other hand, if you had $50,000, take 1/12 of that, and then multiply that by 250%, that's what you're going to borrow. So then the follow-up is, how do I account for what I spend, or how do I justify what I spend? And I would just take that same number and say that that's what you spent over the ensuing 8 weeks on yourself. And if those numbers are somewhat aligned, then I think that you'll be just fine. I don't know if that's a great answer, but that's the only one I have right now.
No, I think that helps. It's just the forgiveness piece of it is what's kind of confusing to me still, but I think that is very helpful.
Yeah, it is confusing. It's confusing to us too, because we want everybody to have this forgiven 100%, and so we're trying to be as clear as possible, because we don't want these things to turn into loans that they don't get forgiven, because we make a whopping 1% on that, plus they pay us a fee up front. But if it went 2 years, no lender wants that. They want it to be forgiven as much as possible.
Quick question I guess I have, and it's coming up here about lenders. Is there, if your financial institution doesn't do SBA loans, is there a good way to find, I've just through contacts and friends been connected with people who have another contact with another business lender, which is great. is there a list of those, or do we just sort of have to call around?
I don't think there's a list, Trip, because there's actually SBA lenders that don't want to participate in this.
Right.
You may have all heard that Wells Fargo is not really participating. They had a real limited pool for whatever reason. And so, but in general, they do SBA loans. And so it's confusing. You don't have to participate in this as a lender. So there isn't a list per se. And I would say, even if you go to the SBA website and look at lenders that do SBA loans, that is not necessarily going to be an accurate list.
Yeah, and I've found by calling those lenders, sometimes they've said, "Oh, but you know who does do SBA loans that we send people to is this," and it'll be somebody who's not listed on the SBA site, but
right,
you know, and that's who I'm that's been my most promising lead so far, and who I'm working with. So yeah, it seems like sort of just doing the work, kind of like pounding the streets and making the calls to find a lender that's right for you is maybe the way to go.
Yeah. I agree. You're just going to have to call around and see if your bank or credit union does them. Just a little anecdotal example there, Trip, is that if you go to the SBA site in Portland and they put in Bend, our name is the only one that comes up, Mid-Oregon Credit Union. We haven't done an SBA loan in like 3 years. So, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, I want to respect your time, and I really appreciate you being on here with us. It's 1:30.
No problem.
If anybody else has another question, if there's some basic stuff, I think there are probably enough people on the call that over the next 30 minutes, if people want to stay on, we can get some of the basics for people who haven't gotten familiar with the payroll protection program or other programs. I guess maybe my final question to you might be, do you have any suggestions of other resources that you've been sending folks to? Anything particularly exciting pop out? I'm sure you've had your head in this the whole time, but yeah.
Yeah. No, not really. This program is the one that's everyone's applying for. But again, I'd recommend everybody apply directly to the SBA for an emergency loan also. And so, Trip, I would say that if anybody has a follow-up question, if they route them to you or Ryan and get them over to me, I'll do my best to answer the questions.
Like I said, can't thank you enough.
My pleasure. All right. Sounds good. If I can figure out how to drop off this thing, I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Good luck, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.
Okay, great. So everyone else, Steve is still there.
Hey.
Ryan, is he still the host? Maybe that's...
He's not, no. I just unpinned him.
Okay, cool. There he goes. Maybe. Okay, cool. So I know there's some questions that people had that people sent in. They were just sort of maybe some things that could be covered in a quick overview. Do people have follow-up questions at this point that have not been talked about or answered that you'd like to discuss now? And I would be really interested to hear other people's experience moving through the program. I think that could be really helpful for people. If you've talked to the SBA, if you've talked to a lender, if you have any suggestions, I'd love to just open the floor a bit now. So we'll try and talk not over each other.
I have a question. I thought I understood it, but I wanted to make sure I do. So we're a filmmaker media studio. So we pay independent contractors throughout the year, and we probably paid like 24 people in 2019. Do we add up all of those people we paid in terms of our payroll and then get a monthly average of all of that? Because the people vary. I'm
gonna try and field this, and if anybody disagrees, holler. But 1099 subcontractors are not included in your payroll for this program because they are eligible to apply themselves for this program. So what your payroll would consist of is anything that you paid payroll taxes on, anything that you ran payroll, and for people who would get a W-2, and whatever the owners of the business paid themselves. And you would add up those two things for last year, divide that by the total by 12, and then multiply that number. So that's your monthly by 2.5.
That's for the one that's coming out on Friday too. I thought the payroll was if we didn't pay people, but we paid independent contractors, those were like our employees essentially.
No, all of your independent contractors are eligible to apply, or I assume most of them would be eligible to apply themselves on Friday. So they're not. This would be if you don't have employees, you could or could not have subcontractors. And then but you apply with your own owner's draws income on Friday.
Oh, I misunderstood that. So we're not trying to keep our independent contractors that are like employees. It's just for ourselves.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, or does anybody else have?
Could I ask you on that owner draw item? It sounds like you got a little info on that, and I might have missed it in the earlier in the meeting. But how is that component determined? Is that only for LLC and sole proprietorship, or for like S corp and C corp? Do you know?
If you use, okay, so here's what I've heard. If you are an S corp and you have guaranteed, or an LLC and you have guaranteed income, like you pay yourself every month, or if you just pay yourself through owner draws, kind of whenever you can, whenever you choose to, you take your total from last year, divide that by 12, and then multiply that by 2.5, and that's your monthly payroll. And the way that you document that, and this is, I think, a bit of a sticking point. The way that you document your own income is, well, like I said, I talked to Lendio, and they wanted me to have 2019 taxes done, or they wouldn't allow me to include it. But Steve just said, no, you should be able to use 2018 taxes plus your profit and loss statement. That just shows how much you were able to pay yourself last year. And so that squares with what I've been told before this call, which was if you find a lender that doesn't want to accept your documents, talk to some other lenders. And if you can't, as Steve said, don't let any moss grow.
Yeah, thank you.
Chip, it's Karen here. I've got a quick question. You keep saying lender draw, and this is going to sound real amateur, but I get money in and money goes out. So in terms of any formal documenting of paying myself, it all sort of sits in the same account, and if it looks okay, it's okay. So, I mean, is that gonna, ping me badly in some way because I don't formally pay myself?
I think a lot of people are going to be in that same boat, and so because people have varying degrees of business organization and structure. And yes, thank you, Matt. Yeah, owner draw, not lender draw. So even if you don't have an LLC, if you pay taxes on your income, you would just take the number that you said was your income last year, regardless of what account it is in or comes and goes out of, and divide that by 12, multiply by 2.5. As far as I know. My guess is, as Steve was saying, it's really solidifying on the go here as to what is going to work for people, what's going to work for lenders to prove your income. So if you haven't filed taxes for 2019, you would use 2018 and then calculate the same thing, the same number as terms of how much you would pay for 2019, and be able to show that that's similar to 2018. Does that answer your question?
Can I jump? I just have one thing to add to that.
Okay, great.
I think
Yeah, it does.
I think overall,
Thank you.
don't get too caught up in the like how do I prove it? Basically, I think what they're looking for is a consistency and a reasonableness to what you're asking for, right? So if in 2019 you made an average of $2,000 a month, but then this year you're saying, well, I'm supposed to pay myself $6,000 a month, so I need $24,000. They're not going to give that to you. So they want to see sort of a consistency from previous years until now, so that they know that what they're paying out to you is reasonable. And I think that's kind of the takeaway that I got earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good point, and I think it's consistency over the course of 12 months. That's why you're taking that 12 months and dividing. If you have months with no income, it doesn't matter, as long as you have income for the year.
I have a follow-up question about the forgiveness aspect of this too. I completely just blanked on what I was going to say. I was in a webinar this morning with SBA regional administrator, actually. He was pretty frustrated with the level of responsiveness of the banks, whether or not they were accepting new people. But the sense I got from him was that it was a all or nothing forgiveness aspect. Is that true? Or if we take out loans that are larger, then we can show that we paid out for payroll. Is that going to be turned into a loan, or will that be forgiven? Do you know if it's a all or nothing sort of circumstance?
I mean, I don't know personally, but based on what Steve said, if you're either you pay your employees and you pay yourself something that looked like what you paid them last year, or you spend it on something different, right? So like, I think that the bottom line is, and kind of as Becca was just saying, like, if you pay yourself something that looks reasonable, like you paid yourself last year or the year before, I don't think that they're going to, call that to question. If you suddenly, I don't know, whatever, stopped paying employees, if you lay off employees or something like that, and you, or you, I don't know, say that you, whatever, don't pay rent and pay it to yourself, that might be a problem. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Sort of, but you do think it's an all or nothing kind of thing, and either all gets forgiven or it all turns into a loan.
I have read that. The wording that I've seen is that they are not likely to forgive loans that use less than 75% for payroll. And the wording kind of made me think like they might, I don't know, yeah, it might be a percentage of the loan. But also the advice that I'm hearing is like, you're probably going to be fine if you read the guidelines and spend it appropriately. So I don't know the percentage number or question. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I was just going to maybe add that they probably aren't going to give you more money than you say you will spend on those things. So like, it might not be an all or nothing so much as they're only going to give you the amount of money that would be forgivable for you, if that makes sense.
And
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
And just chiming in as a bookkeeper, and this is like definitely, I'm thinking like 6 months, like hoping we get this money. I think that being really mindful of your tracking, I'm just going to like plug that right now, like tracking what you're spending on and thinking about how you're going to track it now will make it a lot easier to justify that if and when we get that clarification, because I think that is a really interesting, and I have not seen that broken out in a lot of my conversations with other accountants and bookkeepers. How are we going to know what it was spent on unless we're tracking it, and who's going to verify that? So that's something I'm thinking about. But I am with, I think, I forget who was that, Becca said that, you know, they're going to, if you're asking for what is actually like what you need for those things that qualify, you should be good, you know, either forgivable, or worst case scenario. I mean, if you need the money, it's a 1%, it's a low interest loan. So like, that's less than putting money on your credit card. So if it doesn't become forgivable, like, I just don't see a negative like, it's just not, it's still a good thing to have. Even if it somehow doesn't work out that way. So just being mindful of your spending and tracking it. Those are my 2 comments right now.
Gonna put in a plug for Katie Megan, Bandit Books, right there. Keeper, she does my books.
Hey.
Documenting.
Thank you.
Has anybody, I don't know, applied and been reached out to by a lender? Does anybody have any relevant experience, I guess, with either the payroll protection plan or any relevant experience with the economic injury disaster loan? Those are the kind of 2 most applicable to folks on this call. If you do, please let us know.
I applied for the economic disaster loan and would love to hear if anybody's heard anything, because I've heard absolutely zero, not a nothing. Not even a response email saying it was received. I got just a number, this is your application number, and that was it. I have other friends who've done it and no one's heard anything.
Yeah, I think that's everybody's experience that I know of so far, except for Becca, who's on this call. So if anybody, I mean, I think we're probably all in the same boat. We took 5 minutes or 10 minutes and applied for the EIDL loan, which becomes a grant, and didn't hear anything back, which is somehow not surprising to me. Becca, do you want to just briefly, I mean, is there any updates since Saturday? Do you want to just briefly tell us your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I am a business consultant, so I'm interested in this not just for myself, but also for a small business I work for. So on his behalf, I applied. So Washington State, we're in Washington, was the first state to be accepted to the SBA EIDL program. And so we were very early on in being able to apply for that. So I applied the first day it was available. It was a very long, complicated application. This is before the $10,000 grant thing came out. It took me like 2 days to put the application together. I actually talked to somebody at SBA on the phone and with a specific question about the application. And they basically said, just get it out the door, get it to us. We'll review it. We'll assign you somebody, and then you can talk to them about the specifics. We got it out the door, and about 48 hours later, got a sort of stock response back that we had been declined. We've been denied for the loan. The next day, the $10,000 grant was available, and so we applied for that as well. For the $10,000 grant, we have not heard a word. Same thing. We sent in the application, no confirmation email, nothing. But then we did hear back that they had reopened the EIDL loan application because they had essentially loosened the guidelines, the criteria by which they were determining who was eligible for that. Since they did that, we have not heard anything else. So our EIDL application was denied very quickly and then reopened. But we haven't heard anything else on that, and we haven't heard. I applied both on our behalf and on my client's behalf for the $10,000 grant, and we've heard nothing there either.
Talking with the SBA administrator on that webinar this morning, they said the EIDL advance grants are several weeks out. He said just apply for it. You won't hear anything, but it'll take a couple weeks, and they are processing those. If you need money sooner, the Paycheck Protection is more likely to pay out and get funded much sooner. But the EIDL advance grants are still a number of weeks out and processing.
Nice, thanks for that. That's fascinating. I would have thought it was the opposite. But, before folks really start dropping off and leaving the call, I just want to say that Ryan and I are working on having this become a weekly, every Wednesday, just sort of during the crisis call, so that we can share resources, let people know, hear if people are getting the loans, if anybody is having new problems. And we're going to work on bringing relevant expertise to the table like we did with Steve. So if you all are interested, we'll just send a follow-up email with anything we hear back from Steve, as well as an invite to continue to be on these calls, or even just follow up via email, because you can watch, we're recording them and you can watch them later if you'd like.
Yeah. Can I just interject there really quick?
Yes.
I wanted to get some input from everybody. My idea was to create a YouTube channel for this and just post these every week under the Desk and Mug account. Does that sound like it would be something that would be useful for everybody? And maybe do timestamps where it addresses each point that we discuss?
Oh, that's a great call. Yeah, let's do that. I think we'll process the information together and get it out to folks, and people can opt in after this as well. Someone just, great. Matt just asked, do unemployment benefits affect either SBA loan or grant? And that is an interesting question. If people have some amount of W-2 income from last year and are able to apply for unemployment, does it affect your ability to get that grant? I bet you could do both. And I think everybody's advice so far has been apply to everything that you can yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And let the people in charge decide. So if you have unemployment from W-2 income, you should be able to, and you have loss of 1099 or business income, you should be able to apply for both. I think there's also 1099 people and sole proprietors who have attempted to apply for unemployment through some maybe expanded benefits. Can anybody speak to if non-traditional unemployment recipients might actually be able to apply for unemployment in some overlap with this grant and loan program?
I have seen nothing that has looked promising for people who do not have W-2s or have any amount of W-2 income, or is a sole proprietor who has been paying unemployment insurance. That's the other way. If you're a sole proprietor and you have yourself on payroll, either anyone can run payroll, but those are the only ways that I've seen it work. It would be great. There's supposedly this $600 add-on to unemployment right now that for people who do file for unemployment, people I just spoke of aren't doing that right now, could get on top of it, which has not come out, but it would. I've read that people are saying, like, could we get that $600, just that minimum $600 weekly benefit for self-employed, but there's been nothing definitive that I've seen.
I filed for Q yesterday on Arizona's website. Each state has its own when they're ready, I found out. Oregon also said you could start applying, but Colorado wasn't ready. And that's for the independent contractors. Never before would we ever have been able to apply. So we filled out the form and they said we'll get a letter in the mail requesting more information. Great.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I'd love to hear if you have an update of how that goes. Like because I think you all are also going to apply for the payroll protection. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, please keep us updated. I'd love to hear how it goes in terms of, like, do they, say you can do one or can't do the other, or And especially, I mean, if you end up getting unemployment as a 1099 contractor, that'd be fascinating.
Be
I'm
awesome.
stoked for your position of that.
Yeah, I'll definitely update you as soon as we know more.
Thanks. Anybody else? Anybody applied with any sort of promising, I don't know, communication or interest for other support programs that they'd like to mention here? I think there's a zillion little ones, but if anybody has relevant experience, it might be interesting to share.
Has anybody had any expertise, or have anybody tried to apply for some of these Portland specific grants? Are they available? Who are they available
I got
to?
a grant.
You did?
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly my experience here. And it's not applicable to everybody, but maybe in a sense it could be. So I'm a musician primarily, and I was just keeping an eye out for all of the grants that were popping up for things that could be related to me. And I applied and got one almost immediately. So in that vein, I would just suggest that you look for as many opportunities as you can. Yeah, Prosper Portland is a good one. Oh, and they reopened today. That's really helpful, Matt. Thank you.
They didn't. They reopened their. It's not a grant. It's a loan. So they.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can speak to that when you're finished, Ryan.
Yeah.
I have some updates on that.
I was just making a general point though that I happened to have success applying for as many grants as I could find out there, and I really encourage people to schedule a couple hours in a week, maybe even just to I have it on my daily schedule to spend half an hour just looking for grants and applying. And I think that'll probably bear fruit for people.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a client so the Prosper Portland offered a relief grant. This was for a pretty specific Portland sector, and these were just straight up grants, I think up to 10,000. And my client got denied. They said that they had 11,000 submissions, almost 9,000 of them were eligible, and they were able to fund only 210 of them. So, and that was for the Portland Prosper, the most recent one that just happened last week. But they, they told people that as of today, there is a small business relief fund program, and it's a loan, not a grant. So, but it's a zero interest loan, which is pretty amazing. But they are focusing on sort of the more vulnerable. They have sort of a specific profile, I think. So low income women, or women, POC, more of a diverse group. So, but it doesn't hurt to apply. I'm telling a lot of my people to do it for Portland proper.
Yeah, and actually, as people are starting to list some in the comments, if folks do have cool opportunities they want to share, I would love to see this kind of a conversation turn into, sort of support network where we can share resources like that. So feel free to just respond to that invitation email for this call with cool opportunities, and we'll share them with everybody. When we do just one quick email follow-up, you won't get a bunch of emails, I promise. And it's about to, so I think we should probably start.
No.
Anyway, it's about to. So yeah, thanks for joining. And we'll be in touch with any follow-ups from Steve and what's coming on up next. Hope everybody's staying safe and healthy and isolated.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And just like we did, we're gonna do this again next week. That's the plan. So if you have more questions, because everything keeps changing, right? Just shoot them our way to the deskandmug@gmail account, and we'll just keep doing this again.
All right, talk to y'all soon. Be well.